Welcome to the Conscious Dominance Podcast, where Andrew and Eric, two dominant men in dom-sub relationships, discuss how we approach our dominant roles from a conscious and loving place, and what we learn about ourselves through the deep intimacy that these power exchange dynamics make possible. Sit back and enjoy the show.
These conversations, I know we both look forward to them every week, and we've had these now together for a long time. We've only recently started recording them, but today we bounce these ideas back and forth about what we want to talk about. And I brought this idea to you about kind of having a conversation around the pressure that we put on ourselves and the expectations we put on ourselves for perfection. And, you jumped on it with a lot of exclamation points with the "let's do this." And, for me, this one feels really alive because I've been witnessing so many people in my coaching practice and in the course that I just released that have this like massive pressure they put on themselves. And like, I just have a ton of empathy for guys that do that because I have been there so many times in my past where I just had these massive expectations of myself, and I would just load myself up with pressure and try to fix everything all at once and just continue inevitably to collapse under the weight of the massive expectation that I was going to fix everything. And what that turned into for me was it really destroyed a lot of the trust that I had in myself, because I would try, fail. And I already felt like a failure. And the reason I was trying so hard is because I saw all of the ways that I needed to be better than I was. And it's really tough as a guy when you see all of those different ways you need to be better. It's tough to then take a slow, measured approach to getting better, because you feel like shit when you see all those pieces about yourself where you know that you could be better than you are and you want to make them all different right now. And so it was like I only actually started to improve when I stopped trying so damn hard and let myself just take a slow, like steady, measured approach to it's almost like I know you have a history growing up in Japan of the Japanese culture, and this comes from Japanese culture, the philosophy of Kaizen, right? This like slow gradual improvement, 1% better every day. Like, look for the little thing that you can actually do now versus trying to fix everything all at once. So I'm curious, you hit a lot of exclamation points when I brought this idea up. Why is this so alive for you right now?
Oh, well, thank you. It's big. I think it happens it's a theme that it's almost, I think, worthy of just, before we figure out how to solve it, I think naming the problem and spending some time sort of naming the problem is worthwhile. I think it's a lot to do with Western culture. I think it's a lot to do with ego. I think a lot of the problems or issues that I face are not necessarily unique to me, but I think are part of what it is growing up male in the West, in America, and this culture. I think it's also part of coming to, when you are in a relationship with a woman and she has a voice, it's a very obvious thing, but that voice is going to pierce your ego. I mean, that's the design. That's the point of it in many ways. It's not necessarily there. We got it wrong thinking that it's there to be a place of pacifying us or making it easier for us when we're in our storm. And this is where I feel like a lot of relationship and the way that I used to think about relationship was there could be an eddy in the relationship, because what happens is a man will get stuck in his pain. So for example, I was stuck in my pain, my trauma, my issues, my incapacities, my self-loathing, all the number of things that I could say are the reasons why I'm feeling the feeling that I'm having. That's taking me down. And then the very nature of being in a relationship like this requires you to show up with a certain level of confidence and a certain level of competence. And when you're not able to do that, sometimes what you do is you put on barriers to protect yourself, and you're not as meticulous. You're not as careful with the way that you're expressing or leading. And sometimes you don't even show up. And sometimes you could be erratic, and sometimes you can be defensive. And anytime that frequency starts getting into where the wounded part of me, which was happening, where I'm feeling all these wounds, and then she's speaking just truth, it pierces through my wounds, hits me and hurts me in a way that's very significant. So that, and then that feels like I'm in the midst of something that, I think an eddy is really a great example of, like, when you're watching in the water and the stream's coming down, and then the water, and like you'll watch a stick go, and then all of a sudden it sort of gets stuck on the side of a river or the side of the stream, and it's going one direction and it kind of circles, and you keep thinking it's going to make it out. And you're using all this energy to push it out, and it gets stuck, and then push it out. And so the relationship becomes this eddy. No matter how much you try to fix it, it swings back around, because how you're trying to fix it is from this place where your frequency, you're not fixing yourself. I think a big part of it, when you're saying this, is that we think of this mindset, and I think a lot of what the Japanese speaks about in these cultures, when they speak about surrendering, I realized this week, it sounds pretty basic here, but it was profound when I sat with it, that surrendering to what is not giving up. That when you surrender and look at the facts and really face and see what's going on in your life, does not mean you're giving up and allowing those things to to defeat you. You're just literally sitting with what is. And there's something about being able to look at the reality of your life, the gap between who you are and who you want to be, to truly look at all of your insecurities, to truly look at all of who you are, and be able to sit there and not get deflated and not feel, you are of course going to be deflated. You are of course going to feel these things, but what it is to rise that ship and feel, okay, how are we going to address this? How are we going to deal with this? How are we going to move forward? That process of going from deflation to erection, you think that you're going to go find your woman and she's going to unconsciously help you with that process. And so you go there to try to fix her because she's kind of upset because she feels you're upset. And so you think, if I could go make her feel better, then I'll feel better. But you're going to make her feel better to feel better. And as long as I'm not addressing and truly owning my stuff and truly dealing with my stuff, and I'm going over there to fix her to feel better, what happens is when she's not fixed yet, or she's not quite do that, she can feel that. And so then she points back and it's like, dude, you're not in a place to be doing anybody or saying anything. Like, you need to be in this place that looks in the mirror and owns your stuff and does your work. And it's not to say that I have to be perfect. And that's often when I'm in that state, it's like, oh, you want me to be perfect, or you want me to do this, and I feel like I can't do anything, and I've done all this and this and this and this, and you got a fucking list of all the things that you showed up and all the ways that you're really the man. None of that matters. None of that fucking matters. What matters is your capacity in that moment to not be, to be able to hold your emotions, to be able to hold yourself, to hold your fear, and not get triggered by her reactions. Whatever the reality is, no matter how bad it is, all of it that matters is in the moment. Can you find that stillness? Can you find that like wu wei, like just this way of being? Because it's in that moment of like emptiness or surrender that the response or the spontaneous, the new thing that will alleviate and move us forward will come through, and it'll be new. Because when you're stuck in your patterns, you're literally trying, as Einstein says, you can't fix the problem with the mindset that created the problem. Like, we can't be fixing something from this harried place. We have to get to a new place. And in order to get to a new place, we have to surrender to actually be with and sit with what is. I mean, I have a lot more I could say with this, But you asked me, why does it live large? It's because it's almost like time and time again, I have to go back and relearn this. Why? Because I have next layers of trauma, next layers of issues that I'm dealing with in my life. And I'm not always as skilled at dealing with these next things because I actually haven't never felt these things. And so it's like, we have to be compassionate with ourselves. We have to be unconditionally loving to ourselves. Doesn't mean that we're accepting forever and ever that we're going to be a shit show. It just means if we're not accepting who we are in the moment, we're not allowing ourselves to relinquish all the barriers that actually can see ourselves so we can actually address the very issues that are holding us back. So there has to be the softening, but that softening can't be done around her when you're in that state. So literally, there needs to be this separation where you need to go and do this work on your own and go find containers, go find people that you can sit with and that can hold you so that you can do this work, because the work truly is an inside work. So you can come back and be in this more space that is a spaciousness where the ideas will come forward. We're at a time where the way we're going to solve the problems are not going to be through just our head. We have to be integrating our head and our heart and our whole body and all that's around us. And it sounds rather like woo-woo, but it's not. Like when you get to this place, any artist will tell you, anybody that's creative, anybody that's in this next state, we have to have creative solutions. Those creative solutions don't just come from our head. They come from another space. That another space, we have to make room for that space. And in order to make our trauma, our judgments, all this shit is actually literally like a bunch of shit in your house that you can't even think because there's all this shit in the house and you got to clear it out. And I was doing some shit clearing this weekend. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think one of the things that these conversations that we have can really be for other guys is that permission to slow down and to have some compassion and patience for yourself, because there really are two different ways that I think men approach dominance. There's I'm going to use power and authority in this relationship to change her and make her into something that doesn't trigger me, that doesn't upset me, that lets me avoid all of my own pain. So I'm going to be able to take control of her and get what I want from her and have more control over the outside world so that my inner world doesn't have to be bothered by her showing up as something other than what I want her to. And that's one approach that some guys take to dominance. And what it ends up doing is just they're trying to crush another human being.
They're actually making her smaller.
Exactly.
So they have to make her voice smaller and silence it because her voice naturally is going to provoke your ego and provoke.
Right. And so they're trying to protect their ego by taking control. And what we're talking about here in dominance is really taking a different approach, which is, to your point earlier, dealing with the reality and being present rather than trying to avoid reality, rather than trying to avoid pain, avoid hurt, avoid things that we don't like. We are saying, you know what? I'm going to throw myself wide open and we're going to deal with the truth here. It's not about what I've done in the past or haven't done in the past. It's who am I right now? What am I experiencing right now? What are you experiencing right now? How can I lead us forward to a place where we are better together? And for me, sometimes that's meant that all the time it's meant I've had to let walls down, not build new ones, and not try to get her to avoid them, but to really, when she's using her voice and she's saying hey, bucko, you are really not, this doesn't feel good to me right now, the way that you're showing up, rather than reacting to that and trying to tell her she's wrong and that I'm okay and she's just fucked up because she doesn't understand how great I am. Instead, being willing to tune into her and to let the walls come down and feel, what is it that about me that's showing up in a way that's affecting her like that? And to have a willingness to be wrong. And that's the one thing I think that a lot of guys, and myself in the past, still sometimes now, struggle with, like wanting to be right, even when I'm not.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, I think business gives us more examples of this than I've seen in the relationship world. But like when you look at a business book, one of the books that's really meant a lot to me is Good to Great. And in that book, he talks about a level 5 leader, that the businesses that went from, they study all these different businesses, and they've looked at businesses that have sustainably moved from good to great over a long period of time. And so for me, it's a great model, because what I'm interested is I can do a one-off weekend short relationships of this kind of energy, but what is a DS type of energy? But what is it to maintain that over a long period of time? How do we institutionalize this? How do we sort of bring life to something? Like, it's contradictory. You want to have something that's solid and lasting, but at the same time dynamic and full of life and spontaneous and all that. So these two tension of those two things, and built into that is that you first and foremost, in this book, is level 5 leader. And a level 5 leader is someone who is humble, someone who is like a really good team captain, somebody who is able to look out and see what's out in the world, but is no less driven. He's no less able to have ambition, no less able to take the business where he wants it to go, but he's not about him first and foremost. It's about the business. And another way to say it, it's about your values. It's about the principles. And so the way this could correlate into the relationship is if you put the values, your values first, like the company of the relationship is literally your values. Like your values become the relationship. How she feels, her emotions, whether she's doing what you want her to do, all that stuff, that's like looking at how much money you're making and letting that always make the decisions for you. You have to have values that you stand by, that you live by. And those values have to be, because if you make success, but you sacrifice and you don't live your values, that's going to be a short-lived success. But if you can have values and find that success, both in business and in relationship, you're actually literally you're going to be allowed to be transforming yourself. And in that transformation, it becomes healing. And it's not at the detriment, not where you crack under the weight of her and what she's going through, because she's got to be able to allow to have those breakdowns, to go through these feelings. You want her to have that, because any woman worth her salt has got to be able to break down in front of you, because if you want her to be surrendered, you want her to be in a more submissive state, she can't be in control all the time. She can't be the one running the show, knowing where everything is, doing everything. But you also at the same time need to honor that. And if you can't have the humility to learn from her and listen to her and understand that she has something to offer, and not let that be a barometer or an indictment on you, who you are as a leader. It's like a good leader going in and be like, I can learn from the people underneath me. It does not make me less of a leader that I ask the people underneath me, you know more than I do about this subject. Tell me, and then I can incorporate that and then lead you in a way that's better. And I think, to me, that model, that for a guy, it's still so hard for us to get our head around, that leadership can be humble, but it has to be for it to be lasting. And I think that's where, but it's not a humility that's full of shame or full of self-pity or self-doubt. Like, it has to be a confident humility. Like, you have to have the humility to look at what is, to face the brutal facts. That's another part of this. They talk about the Stockdale paradox, which is during the Vietnam War, the people that were able to last and live were the people that had both the capacity to see around them what the real facts on the ground were, and remain optimistic. The people that were overly optimistic, they didn't last. And the people that were too overly pessimistic, they didn't last. And so it's a middle way. Going back again to the East, there is this middle way, and that capacity. This is what I feel like conscious doming is very much like conscious leadership in business. They're one and the same in many, many ways. we're just bringing in our heart and our cock to the situation. I mean, you bring in your heart to the situation in business, but there's that other element that I just mentioned as well. So
the thing that we, I think, struggle with a lot as guys is there's this thing that we do where we're constantly trying to feel like we're enough, like we're good enough, like we've met the expectations that, and this I think goes back to childhood and wanting to be the good boy, and how we're trained and domesticated to be like, basically we're at least in my life, I was taught that to be a good boy, I had to be a girl. Sit down, be quiet, like be pleasant and happy, and like to be like active and destructive and kind of breaking things and putting them back together.
At least what I would say is you had to be like a girl, a domesticated good girl.
Right. And, our culture treats a lot of boys like they're defect girls.
Mm-hmm.
And then we end up as men feeling as though we are never enough, and we're always having to try to prove ourselves. We're always having to try to do it right, and comparing ourselves to these impossible expectations, because we never actually figured out that we were okay as we are, and that we can do things that we want to do, and that can be a good thing for the world. And instead we come up with this belief that, in order to be good as a man, we need to be pleasing everyone else.
And I want to add to that, in order to be good as a man, we have to succeed. We have to make money. We have to look a certain way. We have to fuck a certain way. We have to be able to do all these like a checklist. And until we've fulfilled that checklist and had some sort of external validation or whatever the checklist that we have in our head, that we're not allowed to feel good in ourselves.
And that's where this pressure comes from that we put on ourselves. And, as we see that gap between where we are and where we want to be, or who we are now and who we believe ourselves to be capable of becoming, we have to deal with the reality that's right in front of us.
Yes.
And if we're trying to fix problems that we aren't equipped to fix, we're going to throw solutions at the wall. They're not going to stick, and we're going to feel like failure. And that's where we have to be able to, even though we may see 100 things where we need to improve as a man, we need to work on the one that is present in the reality of the situation and the reality of life right now, and not beat ourselves up for not yet having maybe even attacked or started to put effort into the other 99 that we know we need to. And that's really fucking hard for a guy to be like, maybe there's emotional self-control and there's fitness as just two of the things. But guess what? If you're putting a lot of energy into sorting out your emotional self, you might not have a lot of energy to be putting into your physical fitness right now. And you can't do everything all at once. But if you continue to work on one thing at a time and allow the other things, the patience, to come later, when you've built on the foundation that you have and dealt with the reality of what you're capable of in your life right now, you can take that pressure off. And instead of trying to get everything done in 3 months, if you cast a longer view and look at your self-improvement as, one of the things Don and I say to each other all the time is, we're not in like a good enough, not good enough kind of paradigm anymore. We are in a let's see how good this can get kind of paradigm. And we are like every day working to show up as our best self, little by little. And we're casting a view that's out 10 years, not what has to happen in a month or 2 months. And so then I can like let some of the pressure down as the one who's leading and the one who's taking charge. It's only when I've been able to set that pressure down that I put on myself and actually deal with what's here right now that I can that I can actually begin to accept her where she's at, rather than like all of this other stuff that I put pressure on when I had all that pressure on me.
And she can feel it. If you can't accept yourself where you're at, you can't accept her where she's at. And so as long as you're judging yourself, you're judging your weakness, you're judging your feminine, you're judging all these, she can't help. They're sensitive. Like, I hate, they can feel, like Rachel feels things. She just knows. So if I'm coming at her fixing mode, and I haven't really allowed myself to be where I am, then what I'm trying to tell her is that until she gets better, I won't feel better. That her capacity to feel better is linked to my capacity to feel better. And as long as that happens, I'm needy. And I'm in a need, and then nothing worse for a woman than a needy guy. And so so my very act of service, my very act of leadership, these things become needy acts. And so the way it's so, I mean, you talk about this really well, but the true doming, let's take that word and say, where are we taking responsibility for our life and not allowing ourselves to deviate? Where are we committing wholeheartedly? Yes, it's in the relationship. And in order to do that in the relationship, you have to do it with yourself. You have to do it with yourself. You have to be in the space. And the domination isn't a forcing. It's truly what we're doing is we're allowing this thing to be seen so that it can be alchemized and transformed. So there's a paradox. If you don't understand paradox, you cannot do this. If you do not understand the idea that two things can be true at the same time that are opposite, and that you're literally trying to weave the two together, forget about it. And women are like the opposite of men. So in a lot of ways, there's opposites, there's poles. That's the whole point of polarity. So if you're coming at it from a place that's just myopic, your own thinking, and it's you over here, what will happen is you will literally take her and push her down and down and down and down and down. And she will feel that. Because why? Because you're doing that to yourself. The way that you think you're sensitive, the parts of you that are feminine, the parts of you that are inconvenient, that are inefficient, that don't work with your goals and where you're going, you try to push those down and push those away. Well, guess what? You're going to do that to the woman as well. I'm using my hands to push down the woman, push down yourself. What's the other way? The other way is alchemizing. The other way is like a horse whisperer. The other way is like biodynamic or regenerative farming. The other way is like the level 5 leader, where it's like, oh, I see that you're having issues here. How can I best support you to get where you want to go? You've got a lot to offer here. You wouldn't be with this woman if she wasn't somebody that you wanted for the long term. You wouldn't be with yourself. Well, first of all, you got to get to that point where you even have the sense of self-worth, that you believe in yourself. That's a part of this as well. But as long as you're believing in yourself and you're striving, part of striving is acknowledging what's holding you back.
And when we're putting all that pressure on ourselves, all that striving, all that like trying to change things so we feel okay, and we're pushing ourselves down, if we can't sit in calm presence with ourselves and just accept the reality of where we are, we're not going to be able to be present enough to let her in. Mm-hmm. She's not going to feel like she can get in. Like, Dawn loves like the service side of submission. She absolutely loves it. If I allow her to help me to do things to help make my life easier, she lights up from it. But if I'm over here feeling like I have to do it all myself and I'm a failure because I should be this, I should be that, I'm supposed to be this, I'm supposed to be that, and I'm just trying to do it all myself and I'm not letting her serve me, I'm not letting her love me. And it's really hard to allow her in when I'm putting all this pressure on me.
I can relate to that.
And that's been a hard one for me to get over, and it still is at times, because I talk about this. I teach dominance to men as you are the one responsible. You're the one leading. You're the one in charge. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that she just has to sit over there and wait to be bossed around, mm-hmm. and that she doesn't have any agency. Like, she can be like she's a piece of this union. This is a thing we do together. It isn't just me dragging her with me. It's me putting my arm around her and walking together. And she can serve me. And if I can speak up for my desires, for my needs, for what I need help with, especially if I can see like, shit, I don't have it together over here yet. And this is a piece of my life I'm still growing in.
Yep.
Like, I could really use your help here.
Oh,
And
that's
just having the consciousness and the awareness and the humility, back to your word, to say, you know what, I don't have my shit together here yet. And I want to, and I'm going to, but I need to get my shit together here first in this spot that I'm working on. So like, I'm going to have some patience with myself. I'm going to have some compassion with myself. I'm going to like, I trust myself that I'm going to get to this thing over here and I'm going to grow in this area. But that feels like a second story on a house when I'm like, right now I'm framing up the first story.
right, right. And the guys, we're so funny because we think that if we just don't look over there, don't look in that closet. Like, we're so afraid that they'll see that we don't have our act together. And so we'll and pretend and do all this
But she
stuff.
already knows.
She
She
already
already
knows.
knows.
She already knows. She already knows. And you're like so afraid that she might find out that you can't do this or can't do that. And so you'll do all, and I still get caught in that trap. I mean, one of the things, the beautiful things is that I'm partnered with someone who's brilliant. I'm partnered with someone who is so extremely intelligent, so extremely has an incredible capacity to solve problems. She's competent in so many different ways. And so I can get caught up in myself with Rachel that I feel inadequate, that I don't measure up to her capacities, to her wisdom, to her competence. And especially in the material realms, because she's been on her own her whole life, kind of taking care of herself. So she's really, really skilled. And I find myself, and one of the things that happened this weekend was realizing how much of the relationship was me not wanting her help out of insecurity around the fact that I needed her help. Which is so, and yet, and not asking for her help and not, not really allowing her in fully, her capacity to collaborate, like to really be a team. We're really good at being a team in certain areas, but there are so many areas where I really could use her support and her help. And it felt like such a, like, how do you get collaboration without neutralizing the relationship, without kind of putting it in the state that sort of numbs it and sort of depolarizes it and puts it into this other place that's like two buddies and two roommates and two friends. And
I want to speak to that before you go too much farther, because
go.
that's a really important thing for the guys listening to this, is that right there. Because on one hand, if you, like, we've all seen the suburban marriages where it's 50-50 division of labor, like, I'm going to do this, you do that. And, you know, a couple might get along really well on a friendliness level, but they don't fuck each other.
Right.
And no, like, having once a month sex when she's ovulating, that's not fucking each other. That's just doing the thing that you do because you live together. When I talk about fucking each other, I mean like deep, energetic, spiritual sex that's better when you have been together for 20 years than it was when you were new together and you had all that new relationship energy. Like, that's fucking each other. And so how do you go through the day-to-day experience of life with the shit that has to get done, the bills that have to get paid, the life that needs to get lived? How do we go through that without depolarizing ourselves? And it really does come from the energy of responsibility on our part as the leader. Like, for me, everything Dawn does to clean the house, to cook meals, to do things that help in the support of our call it the vanilla life, the day-to-day life. All of those things, it's about the energy of responsibility. She is not responsible for them. She is assisting me. She is serving me. And this is my kingdom. This is my domain. Our life, everything about it is mine. And she is a part of it. She is playing a supporting role. She is giving to me. She's not taking care of herself when she's doing something like cooking a meal. She's not just doing it because she has to get it done. She's doing it as an act of service for me. So it's the energy that she brings to it. It's the ownership that I can hold of it. And then it becomes every single act of life can be done in polarity, where it's not division of labor, but it's service, it's leadership. And it sounds like a meaningless distinction, but the energy that you bring to it is everything. And if you can find that energy of ownership and delegation and service, and it comes around to something else I want to talk about in a little bit, but the energy of presence with your whole life and with everything that you do.
I think the biggest challenge that I've had, and this is part of this weekend, is what happens when you realize through a series of tensions, arguments, something happening there where it's off, that it's been reversed in many ways, where you're literally in your quote unquote leadership domination, you're the one running around serving her energy, serving her, being silently in the background, holding everything. And that, like, waking up to that, it feels like you've been living a lie, like in some ways. And this is what it's almost like an existential, like if I hadn't done all this inner work that I had done up to this point, I would have crashed this weekend. Like I would have been like, I'm a fraud, I'm a liar. Like, what the fuck, who do I think I am to be on any sort of podcast, to claim any of this kind of thing? I've been going through and doing all of these things. And in the background, she's been the one feeling the pressure. She's been the one holding everything. She's been the one financially holding way more than she can hold. The house, all these different responsibilities, they're all resting on her. And as much as I'm trying to take them off of her, I'm trying to take them off of her, but from an energy where I'm not necessarily being the one responsible for when the buck stops, who's responsible, who's holding this, who's holding that energy. And it was a big call out. And it felt like very, very intense for me to sit with that. And then it's like, well, what is my worth? Like, what have I even done? And you can't help but spiral down to this place where you're like, what's the point? I suck. There's plenty of other people. And you kind of go down this little slide that's a spiral shit show that the masculine is wont to do. Especially then stack some trauma from your childhood back on there, stack some other issues. All of a sudden, you're fucking Sisyphus going up the mountain, falling back your ass right back down the mountain. And how, like, okay, so you're at that space. How do you come out of it with some sort of integrity, some sort of life? There's nothing like showing up, getting up. You know, in the movies when you've been like beat down, and then all of a sudden the guy gets up. Just that moment, just the moment of him just getting up and being like, all right, I'll take, like that act of just getting up. Like all you need literally to do is stop your wallowing, stop your fucking, I'm this, and just get up. Yeah, I see it all. I feel it all. I've done all of that.
Yep.
Then
pick one thing.
What?
And then pick one thing.
And then pick one thing. Exactly. Pick one thing to pick up and deal with. And then the next thing to deal with. And the next thing, and own all of it. And remain optimistic. Like this is what that Stockdale paradox. This is the paradox. And then all of a sudden you stop living a lie. Because you're living the truth. And as soon as you start living the truth and you start living in that integrity, shit, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. She could feel that energy. I mean, we were back at it last night. Like it all shifted. It had shifted like that because I shifted like that. But that alchemy it's inner alchemy. That's inner work. That's a spiritual, what I would call like It's a spiritual work because it's me looking at my interior. It's me accepting myself fully. I was literally up from like 2 a.m. to 7, like until she woke up. I could not sleep because I was looking back through my life and just being like, and through these last couple months and be like, lie, 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 lie. And literally sitting with all of that and not going to porn, not going to smoke, not going to anything to kind of get myself out of that, sitting with it, sitting with it, sitting with it. And you know what came out the other end was this idea of surrendering is not giving up. Surrendering is not giving up, meaning looking at everything. I surrender to it, but I'm not giving up. And maybe allowing, it's like allowing with what is, and then you're able to kind of rise. And then right at the end, I was like, oh, this is what love is. I'm starting to love myself. Oh, and then right at the end, I'm like, oh, I had this thought. I was like, that must have been hard for her, what she's been going through. Oh, she must be feeling all this stuff. And I stopped thinking, oh, woe is me. Well, because like you can't, if you're constantly thinking about yourself, you can't think about and feel herself. This goes into situational awareness. You want to have real situational awareness? Start feeling the energy, start feeling what's going on inside of her, start feeling what's going on inside of yourself. And if you're not an empty, if you can't get into a true empty alchemized state, when you go to her, you're going to go in a place where you're worried about your shit and she's going to not want to burden you with hers and you're not solving anything. You're just piecemealing that shit together. But if you can be in this other state, you literally, it's like, it's magic. Like it happens fast. But that's the transformative effect. Like this is what I do. But what's interesting is that what I've realized is that you can do this even in a state where you don't have a lot. You don't have your act together. You don't have money. You don't, like whatever situation in your life is, you can own your truth and you could be in a state that's an elevated, alchemized state that's worthy of honor. It's worthy of respect. It's worthy of dignity. And to feel that, that's really just by looking at the truth of your life and finding a way to be erect in it and optimistic and then address, like you say, one thing, not eating that elephant all at once, taking it one bite at a time.
Yeah, and your realization there about surrendering isn't giving up. It really, what it is, it's just accepting reality.
Yes.
You're not giving up on wanting to be better by accepting that you are where you're at.
Right.
And that's the thing. Back to this word that I used a little bit ago, presence. You don't have to be perfect to deserve love as a man. You don't have to be perfect to earn respect. You know what people respect? People who are aware of their reality and humble enough to admit where they're wrong. And also humble enough to say, you know what? I don't have my shit together, but I see where I don't have my shit together and I'm making conscious effort towards it. And that's not giving up. That's just being that is being present. And there is nothing more attractive to any woman than a man who is present. All of this stuff that you're talking about, for me, it's like when I'm stuck in my head and my thoughts are spinning because I'm putting pressure on myself about business, I'm putting pressure on myself about how I'm going to show up, about like my fitness, about money, whatever it is. I'm up here, I'm thinking, I'm spinning around in my head, and I'm not present in my reality. I'm not here. I'm out there somewhere. I'm back there somewhere. And my biggest challenge, and I think the most impactful thing that we can do as men, is to be fully present in our own reality, be fully present in our body, out of our head and into the moment that we're in, because now we can actually feel her.
Exactly.
Now we can actually feel ourselves. Now we can.
That's why you have to get rid of your addictions and your numbing agents and all these things. Like that's a prerequisite.
If we're approaching relating to her or personal change or anything like that from a place where we're in our heads, we're only trying to solve our ego's problems. But if we can get present with the reality of the situation, you go, yeah, you know what? I've put on 10 pounds. I need to take those 10 pounds off, which means it doesn't mean I need to hate on myself because I did it or because I am where I am. It's, I need to get up today and go do my shit.
Mhm.
And a woman doesn't expect or even want you to act like you've got shit together that you don't, because she sees right through it.
Exactly.
And it's being able to be honest and conscious and aware of your reality and to be present in that reality. And then, to your point, know what your values are, know what's important to you, know who you are and how you are going to live your life. Like, that's what it's been for me, is understanding who I am, staying present in this moment, and then being willing to look at the places where I'm a shit show and do one thing: improve myself here, actually make this better, because I can be with it and not be ashamed of it, not try to hide it, to be completely vulnerable with the fact that, yeah, I'm a piece of shit over here.
And you
And
got to do those things for yourself. If you're doing
yep,
those things to be on some checklist for her, hey, look, I did it.
yeah,
Like,
am I a good boy now?
it's got to be, this is the paradox too. Like, it will serve her and it will benefit her, but it has to be from your place. You know, it has to
Because
be.
if you're doing it for her, she's in charge. Like,
Yeah.
now you've put her back in the dominant role where
Yeah.
she needs you to be different,
Yeah.
or you're at least assuming it. So you're trying to figure out where she's not okay with you and make yourself different to fit
Right.
here. You're completely inside of her frame, inside of her reality, and you're trying to
Right.
squeeze yourself
Right. And I think part of the thing is, all, you know, men, we often think, and it is helpful to have and necessary to have success, or to have a frame that's solid and all these things. But there is a time in life where that frame will wobble, whether it's something external, some sort of natural disaster, some sort of economic collapse, some sort of ailment, physical ailment, age, all these different things. If we're not able to adapt and adjust that frame and be able to move that, and if our ego is tied up in exactly the way that identity is, then we have to move out of it. I think this identity and how we identify as ourselves and what we think and who we think we are, that's a very fragile thing when that gets too lockstep. And I think one of the big challenges that I'm realizing is just even the identity of being, I mean, here we are on a podcast talking to men, but the idea of being a man and what that means can really be inhibiting. It can kind of hold us back because we can kind of limit ourselves, and it can be a kind of its own straitjacket. And I think that part of it is to actually, this is where energy becomes such an important word, because if we're really being attuned to energy and we're being attuned to our health and our wellness and our energy and her energy, then the answers and the way that we move forward, they might deviate from our conception of what it means to be a man, from what our conception and our sense of identity of what it means to be a man. And we're going to have a more expanded way of dealing with this situation. And I feel like in many ways, what I've found as I've gone through this, whether we want to call it feminine or masculine or any of these kind of things, like, I need to be more fluid in the way that I feel about these energies and have access to all of them if I'm going to be able to navigate this. If I only limit myself to I'm only allowed to use the cool colors, you know, art wise, then I've limited half the colors that I'm not even allowed to use. And so I feel like I have to be able to take all of what's out there to be able to address this. And that what we're talking about here, when we're talking about conscious Dom, we're literally talking about an energy. And it's an energy of awareness, and it's an energy of owning our reality and an attention. And it's when we're in this energy that we're able to solve and that we're able to be creative. But the actions, the creativity, and even the knowing what to do, are sometimes accessed outside of the boundaries of what it means to be a man. They're in this realm that we might label feminine. And if we don't allow ourselves to go over there and utilize some of these things, we've really limited ourselves. And I feel like that's something that I really appreciate about your work. On its surface, it sounds like it's all this, but as you kind of peel away, you're complicating the paradigm, the stereotype.
What it's had to mean for me Eric, is that I've had to let go of all of those labels and identities of like, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a dom? What does it mean? Or what am I supposed to be here? What am I supposed to be there? And really instead to try to do one thing well, and that's to be me.
Mhm.
Not to try to be masculine. What's my feminine? What is a dom? What's a sub? How about who am I?
Yep.
Like, I heard it put this way one time: is who would I have been if the world didn't get to me, program
Yep.
me?
Yep.
So that takes so much pressure off of trying to fit into these identities and these labels when you really bring it all the way back down to the level of the individual and honor myself and who I am. I've had to learn to be able to breathe through my own inner chaos, to accept the fact that I'm a deeply sensitive person, that I can walk into a room and I can often know and feel what other people are going through and feeling without that, sometimes in a way better than they're even able to. Someone I've never met, but I didn't accept that about myself. I didn't let myself think that that was okay, because it didn't fit into what I thought it meant to be this or that when I was trying to be to fulfill an identity or live inside of someone else's ideology, rather than the individual ideology of who is Andrew and how do I be him all the way. And that really is, for me, accepting all of these parts of myself. The fact that I cry when I hear really beautiful music, and the fact that I have this intense desire to take charge and lead in my life. And like those two things, there's paradox, right? There's this very sensitive side, and there's this very in control, in charge side of me. And all of that is a piece of me. And so instead of trying to get rid of the parts of myself that I judge because they don't fit into one of the labels, one of the assumptions or the meanings that I've made out of what I'm supposed to be or can be and can't be, and come all the way back to presence with the truth of who am I, and to accept all of myself, which I'm still not great at all the time.
It's the hardest to accept the parts of yourself that are a piece of shit, or like it is objectively holding you back, objectively like not, it's a problem.
Well, what I would say to that though is that's actually not a piece of yourself. That is a piece of your resistance. That's not you.
I agree. But if you don't, what I'm trying to say is if you don't allow yourself to even look at it. See, a lot of the problem though is if you don't accept, when we say accept or allow, I wish that these words, they almost kind of get in the way, because what's really meaning is like, I kind of think of it as like, if there's a scared animal or a scared dog, you don't just come right at it. Like, you've got to be kind of like cool with it. You just sit there with it. You got to kind of just sit with the animal for a little bit, and they got to feel that you're cool, they're cool, we're cool. You don't just come right at it. That actually is the parts of you that are not working. It's really kind of a scared little animal, scared little voice, and it's going to bite at you.
Be able to see that part of yourself that needs to be worked on and take some inventory of it without getting into self-hatred and self-judgment.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's kind of what you're getting at there, is to just be able to even admit that there are problems to be solved without getting into judgment.
But the way to get there is gentle. Like, this is again a paradox. Like, if you want to be strong, you've got to be gentle. Like, you got to be gentle with yourself to get to it, to unlock it, and then be unrelenting and rigorous and not let it metastasizing and being in that wallowing in this victim space. So it's like, in the beginning, we need to address it with a softness, but then once it's on its way towards transforming into sort of truth, we need to be rigorous about holding it in its truth and in its light. This is like why I grew up in Christianity, and I feel like Jesus was onto something. Like, his parables, I look back at them and I'm like, oh shit, like he really was onto something. There's some really good ones. And one of the ones is the prodigal son. I realized this prodigal son, and I'll just say it, I think it's a good story to say again for those of you who don't know the story. There's two sons. One son doing everything right. One son, party boy, rich dad. They're doing everything right, guy. It's just like, I'm going to wait to get my inheritance. I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to do the right thing. Party boy's like, Dad, I want my inheritance now. Decides to go off and go have party, go have good times, go live a life. Woo! And then all of a sudden he runs out all this money, comes back to Dad. And Dad throws a party for prodigal son. And good boy is like, what the fuck are you, why are you rewarding this guy for his bad behavior? Like, what are you talking about? And Jesus, as he goes, it's like, we should share, if someone wants to come back to a place of humility, a place of like acknowledging the reality of, wait, I messed up, I need your help, I've surrendered, we should celebrate that. So, and we should not be needing accolades for doing the right thing. So what I realized about the prodigal son is that's inside of us. That's a story about the little parts of us that have deviated, that have been conditioned, that may be the party part, that may be the part that's done the addiction things, that may be the insecure part, whatever the part that's held us back. As soon as that part's like, oh, wait, I messed up. Instead of being like you look at, yeah, you did mess up. You did mess up. What are you doing? They're like, oh, I know, I'm a turd. And then that perpetuates that. Instead, it's the prodigal son. And the dad's like, it's okay. It's okay. You did mess up, but you're back. Come on, it's okay. And then once you're in the house and you're good, then the discipline comes in. Then the rigor comes in. Then we're unfuckable withable. Then we bring out that edge. It's like masculine, like traditionally has often been presented in such a simplistic way. It's like, there's only one button and it's all the way on all the time. And it's like, dude, that button, yeah, there's a time and a place for that. And a very important time and a place for that. But there's this whole other range of qualities that we need to be able to express depending on the situation. And if I, as a father, know that if I come into my little girl when she's 3 and she's crying and she's totally messed up, and I come all at her, that's not going to work. Even she's 14 now, and the same thing. If I come at her like she's like a problem for her emotions and freaking out, and I just stuff that down, that's not going to work. I have to be like, yeah, that is tough, isn't it? Wow, I bet that is hard. Like, let's just sit with that feeling. And like, there is appropriate, that's not saying I want her to do that bad behavior forever and ever, but we have to allow her to get out of that place of the trigger, the fight or flight. That energy is never a place for us to solve problems. It's never a place for us to address things, unless it's a crisis. But most things are not necessarily in a crisis. If you're in a crisis, yes, these rules kind of get thrown out the window, but we're not, if it's just normal life, these things in normal life need to be addressed not from a place of fight or flight, not from a one-size-fits-all sort of mindset, going ham, going hard. Sometimes we often need gentle as a component, as a quality for us to address these parts, especially at the beginning, especially if it's like a new habit we're trying to instill or something that we're trying to do at the beginning. We need to come at it with humility, with gentleness, with a softness that allows it to grow. It's like if you ever had a plant, that plant's got to be protected with a seed, a little seedling, like it needs like tenderness. It doesn't need you to go in after it. Like it's tender. That's ourselves in a new space. That's ourselves when we're doing a new habit. That's ourselves, even with the parts of us that are difficult. And we have to be able to, our job is to literally protect the gentleness. And that protecting the gentleness is with our woman, with our kids, but also most importantly with ourselves. We need to protect the little part of us and give him a place to be gentle inside of ourselves, to honor that and honor that spirit so that it can flourish and strengthen. But if we're not able to do that and we're just judging and harsh and beating, what's happening? That little plant gets beat down and we end up shallow. We don't have an interiority. Most men don't even have an awareness of their insides because they're so violent to it. They've been doing to the inside of themselves what we've been doing to the planet, because they don't want to acknowledge that they can't handle parts of themselves that they feel are weak or insecure or soft, because they've been so wounded when they've expressed that to other people. So this is where we have to provide, yes, safety for her, but first and foremost, we have to provide safety to ourselves.
Yeah, and take care of ourselves so that there's something of us to give that protection to others, because if we don't take care of us first, then there's nothing of us to give.
Correct.
So great conversation again, as always. Appreciate it as always, and look forward to the next one soon, Eric. Thanks for being.
Good times. Good
Yeah,
times.
talk to you soon.
Thank you, Andrew.